So in this lesson we're going to be tackling the bubbles that are on the back of this creature. I will be presenting you with two methods that are working that will help us to separate the bubbles from the body itself, because the modeling stage in the ZBrush, I didn't really do the polygroups for this for the back, and I didn't separate those bubbles separately. I could have done it, and it would have been easier, but we can do it in Houdini too. So we're gonna start from the last thing we left our scene on. If you remember correctly, we computed some normals, and now I'll be adding an attribute triangle. And basically, what I want to do now is have an attribute that will define if the bubbles are bubbles and if the body is a body. So I'll be creating this attribute, an integer attribute, which is going to be 0 for the entire body, and it's going to be 1 for the rest of the body. You'll see how it's done later. So in order to separate the bubbles from the body, I'll be painting them over with different colors using the attribute paint node. If you've never used this node, basically this is a node that allows you to paint any attribute with a brush, and it could be any kind of attribute, a float, a color, or like a vector attribute, different vector components. So in the attribute paint, we're going to just change we're going to leave the mask name like this. We're not going to touch it, but we're going to change the attribute type to color, because we want to paint the bubbles with different colors. And in the brush settings, we're going to be setting the soft edge to 0, because we don't want any intermediary colors between the bubbles. You'll see why a little bit later. So with this node selected, you click enter. With the cursor on the viewport, you click enter, and you have this brush in the viewport. And with the Control Shift pressed, you can, and dragging the left mouse button, you'll be able to change the size of the brush. But I'll be defining the colors, the foreground colors myself. So it's gonna be, I'll be starting with the red one, and so as you can see, I can paint over the bubbles. And sometimes if I need a smaller brush, I Control Shift and left mouse click drag the cursor, and it's gonna allow me to separate the bubble. We're gonna change the color to orange, for example, then paint over this other bubble which is underneath, and I'm gonna be repeating this process over again, again with all the bubbles present in this geometry. So yeah, once you're happy with the color, you can change it to another one and continue with the process. I'll be painting over all of the bubbles. Yeah, so if you overpaint it a little, you can control drag, usually, yeah, control drag the left mouse button over the screen, and you'll remove those pixels, that color from that region. This is one of the more precise methods that allows me to separate the bubbles. There are a few faster ones that I tried, but they're not that accurate, because the bubbles have different sizes, and they don't. You need precision just to define the boundaries of each bubble correctly. So yeah, I'll be switching to other colors now. I can go really fast with this. I'll do all of those bubbles, and we'll come back. So basically, with all of these regions painted, we now have a completely painted model, all the bubbles completely colored. I repainted this attribute. I call it mask 2 because I changed the node. I redid it basically again, and now we'll be promoting this attribute to a primitive attribute. So when you promote an attribute like this to a primitive, basically because now if you see, we have the mask 2 as a 3 float attribute, and it's a point attribute. So I want to separate the primitives based on this color, so I'll be promoting it to primitive from point, basically changing the type of attribute. This way, like, you can display your mask. And you see, what I don't want to have when I promote my attribute to primitive is average, because it's going to create gradients in between the colors. We don't need those intermediary colors. I really want a hard edge between those bubbles. So I'm going to use the first match. So it's going to be working like this. Better, much better. Okay, so Now we're gonna primitive split this. Um, I'm doing this for separation purposes because I wanna really split by mask 2, and this primitive split is going to generate us a different primitives. Like if you do an exploded view, you'll see that it's exploding right here. But let me see. I have to adjust the tolerance. Not only that, so will be there's some issues uh, with the connectivity, and when you do the exploded view, you see that there's more pieces that we want. So the solution to this is just going back to the attribute paint node and filling up some unwanted holes. Basically, if you I'll leave activated the attribute promote because I want to see the actual result after promoting the attribute. You see we have some holes here, and we can put it to a first match like this. Go back to attribute paint, and anywhere you see holes, we can fill them up with the paint that we used. In order to sample the color from the existing one, you triple like the third mouse button, the scroll wheel. You press it on that color, and you just fill up the spaces that you need. I'm gonna feel this like there's a little bit of color mixing there happening. Also here, I sample it with the third mouse click button, and then paint over. Fix those little areas that need fixing, and I probably used the soft edge parameter once. Here I shouldn't have used that, but yeah, I'm gonna fix all of that. I have a little mesh error here, but it's not a big deal because we're going to be converting this to tetrahedral meshes and remeshing the mesh. You'll see, and it's gonna go away, and in the render it's not gonna be seen because we're gonna be using a lot of subsurface materials. So yeah, we can go ahead here and see if there's no intermediate colors. Fix this. There's a little hole there. Paint those pixels that do not belong in there. One thing you should know is just the attribute paint paints over points, so if your mesh is not that dense, you'll not see a lot of detail there. But yeah, it's very useful in many cases. In grooming and in Vellum, you have total control over your mesh and your simulation while you paint stuff over. Yeah, so fixing these little holes and then sampling the color with the third mouse click and painting with the left mouse click. Yeah, so let's see what our exploded view does now. The primitive split and the exploded view, they give us some nice results, but still there's some pieces that are not supposed to be there. And if you scale down, these areas that are kinda not painted, they belong to some hidden pieces or faces that are inside the mesh. But it's not a big deal, we're gonna be dealing with those. I'll go back to the attribute paint. And see if I can fix it from the inside of the mesh. Sometimes you have to go really far here. Yeah, so yeah. So we have a lot of small pieces there, as you saw before. And these little pieces that are floating, we're gonna get rid of them. You'll see how. So for the primitive split, I'm gonna use a lower threshold. This parameter defines how sensitive it is to the attribute changes. So it can yield more or less pieces depending on how high you set this tolerance. So if you set it really high, you'll have less pieces, and if you set it really low, it's gonna yield a lot more stuff. Now with the we're gonna make a connectivity attribute. I'm gonna call it class ID. I'm gonna change the base name, and it's going to be a primitive attribute. And the connectivity, like if you visualize now the class ID, you see that we have you see those problematic little pieces of mesh that we don't need. So we're gonna deal with this in a really straightforward way with the blast node. I wanna select primitives. with my selection tool, and we're gonna use 3D connected geometry. So when you click this, you can select the bubbles separately. All the bubbles that we've painted now are separate because we calculated a connectivity attribute. So we have all these bubbles here, but yeah, we have this little issue with this little painted face. Let's go back a little into the attribute paint again. That's funny. It's really funny. Yeah, we don't see that problem here anymore. It's really interesting. And yeah, so let me see the exploded view again. Oh, there's a little face separating from it. Let's play with the the tolerances. I'm gonna just remove that piece. If you saw it, you see that there's a hole here, and when you set it a little bit higher, it's gone. So let's calculate the connectivity again. Go to the blast node, click on the selection arrow, and then go to 3D connected geometry and select all the bubbles. I'm shift clicking on the other ones so they all select together. Yeah, so we have a bunch of bubbles. We click enter, and now we have this remaining mesh. We're gonna delete non-selected and copy this attribute triangle that says bubbles 0 and apply it to this remaining mesh, to the bubbles, but set the bubbles to 1. So now we have separately a bunch of bubbles that have a bubbles attribute set to 1, and we have a class ID attribute. And if we look into the class ID attribute, I don't want to see the color of the attribute, like the attribute as a color. I want to see it as a marker. So if you look closely, we can inspect in the spreadsheet in the primitives. We can see the class ID. As you can see, like the starting ID is 2, and then we jump to like 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 9, 8, 9, 10, 12, 17. So the numbering is not, it doesn't start at 1, and it skips some numbers, and this is not what we need. I want to have a proper class attribute that goes from 1 and above. So in order to do this, I'm going to use an enumerate node, which is basically a node that enumerates a lot of numbers from an attribute and makes them start from 1 or 0, like usually it's 0. So I'm going to put here class ID, the attribute that we had before, enumerate enumerate pieces here, and it's going to be a primitive attribute. So now if you go to let's name it class now, and in the spreadsheet you can see that class ID and class are different. So we start at 0 and we end up at 21. So basically there's actually 22 bubbles here, but the class ID and before it just yielded 29, which is incorrect because it skips a lot of numbers. So we enumerated them, and now we'll be I'll put this attribute triangle after the enumerate. Now we have the bubbles attribute also set to 1, and yeah, so I'll now attribute copy. I'll attribute copy the some attributes from our bubbles to this mesh, and I want to copy the bubbles attribute and the class. So this wording that we have here, you see that it says the copying will be slow, maybe surprising, and a bunch of other stuff. This is because we didn't set a ID attribute, and it doesn't really know where to copy and to copy attributes to from and to. So I'm gonna just create a ID attribute from the pt_none, and in this attribute copy, I'm gonna say match by attribute set to ID. Now the copying is gonna be proper, correct. And also, yeah, we're gonna see our class. Yeah. So the class now is correct. We're gonna group our bubbles into a group. We're gonna call it group bubbles using our attribute, which is bubbles. So now group bubbles is 0, something went wrong there, and oh yeah, we so copied bubbles in class. Oh yeah, so primitives. So now you see, just created a group for those points. Okay, so yeah, so now what we're going to do is remesh this baby, and then I'm going to show you another method of creating the bubbles, just in case you need it in the future, because it's an interesting one. But it works with evenly sized bubbles or elements or whatever you have in your mesh. So let's do a remesh. So as far as you remember, the goal now is to make a geometry that is usable in Vellum. So I'm going to be remeshing this this thing, and I'm going to clean up. First, I'm going to clean up the mesh because I don't need anything here. Remove everything and remesh. I will use some parameters that I used before. Or maybe I'll set the smoothing to 0, iterations to 10, and the target size is going to be 004. These are proven parameters and settings that I used before. So it's going to take a while to remesh, and we have a fairly decent model for simulation. This looks okay for me. And if you like template the original mesh, you see that it's matching very well the original. Now we're going to be transferring. Also, I'm going to change the way the lines are drawn. So you click Shift S, and it's going to change the way it's drawn. Sometimes I prefer this than those diagonal lines. And I'm going to do an attribute transfer because and a group transfer. So we're going to be using this remeshed model. It has less polygons, it's optimized, and it has an evenly sized polygons for simulation. I'm going to transfer the groups from our existing oh yeah, I forgot that I wanted to make a primitive group from the parameter that I had, and what I also forgot is that the bubbles parameter was supposed to be a primitive attribute, so we cannot put both of these in the same wrangle. So I'm going to duplicate this. The ID attribute is going to stay the same here. I'm going to remove the bubbles, but the bubbles will be in a primitive wrangle basically. So it's a primitive attribute. Same goes for this one. It's a primitive attribute. We're transferring a bubbles primitive attribute, and we're grouping the primitives by the bubble attribute. So a little change that is going to change a little bit the flow. Now I'm going to transfer the primitive groups from my quad mesh. So all the groups are going to be transferred here. I'm going to disable this node and uncheck these. Just leave the primitive groups on. Yeah, so the distance threshold is going to be 001, so I want to match it as much as possible. And the wildcard is going to be a GRP underscore and a little star, so all the groups that start with this prefix are going to be transferred. So it takes a little bit of time to transfer this, but not that long. And now we're going to do the same with the class attribute. Primitive, because it's a primitive attribute. Class. So we have a quite like really clean mesh here. We have 6 groups, we have a class attribute, and we have a P attribute. This is all that we need. Yeah. Now, yeah, well, I'm gonna save it as the file cache node. All the geo I'm using, I usually use the constructed one, but let's, for the sake of the simplicity, I'm going to use this one, the explicit, where you explicitly indicate the path and the file name. I'm gonna name it geo symbiote remesh 01 pgosc. Load from disk, frame range to single frame, and save it. Now we have it meshed. So yeah, in the next lesson I'm going to show you the second method that I use for bubbles. I'll try to make it faster than this one. So see you in the next one.